Do you smell that? The springtimes of the people, the spirit of 48, the 1848, I mean. We are finally feeling that in the Palestinian territories with Mahmoud Abbas announcing or basically putting up a decree because he doesn't actually need anybody else to rule, he can do it alone, putting up a decree for an election, specifically an election for the Palestinian National Council, which is basically sort of the PLO's sort of like legislative brand, where everybody, every Palestinian can vote, including the diaspora. This is separate from the Palestinian Legislative Council that has been pretty much didn't ineffective, basically inactive since the civil war, since the Palestinian civil war between Hamas and Fatah, where Hamas won an election and Fatah was like, no, no, no. So they had a, let's say, disagreement where Hamas took over Gaza, killed every Fatah member they could find there, and took over violently. But now Mahmoud Abbas is calling for an election. Now, this would be different. I believe they had kinda of an election about 7 years ago, but that was basically just appointments. So it wasn't like the Palestinians voted, but this would be an actual vote, including 350 members, 350 seats that would be voted for. I think about 200 would be from people living. Sorry. James, do you want to jump in now? Because I
Okay. Well, first let's talk about elections and the moral value or lack thereof of elections and democracy in general. You know, today many people regard in politics democracy as some kind of magical form of getting legitimacy. It is not. It is not. Democracy, raw democracy, if it does not recognize the limits of democracy, the limits of what a democratic majority can do, is not a legitimate state at all. A lot of political thinkers and international thinkers think that democracy confers legitimacy. Of course, this is within the existing framework of the PLO, and is going to be the groups that the PLO, allows to participate in the election. But even leaving all that aside, let's assume that truly every Palestinian, and including the diaspora ones, that's a fascinating thing right there. What does that mean? Like Palestinian refugees in the third, fourth, and fifth generations living in some country 1,000 miles away is a quote Palestinian. But the idea of democracy conferring moral legitimacy is just a misguided idea. It is just a religious intrinsic absolute that somehow that collective consciousness can't be wrong. You know, that a million Frenchmen can't be wrong, or whatever the old saying is. But if you took, say, an election in the antebellum South, when in my country's history there was still slavery in the South, those states like Georgia or Mississippi would surely have voted to keep slavery. Would that have made a slave state a morally legitimate thing? No. In the early 1930s, the last election, before Hitler kind of took over all by himself, the Nazi Party won a plurality. Did that confer moral legitimacy on the Nazi Party? You know, the old Soviet Union used to say, well, we have elections. Now, the fact is that you have to get on the ballot, you have to be approved by the Communist Party. And that's what people would focus on, you see, is that it's limited. They don't have a proper democracy. Or in places where there's no free speech, people think that the election has any kind of damn value. What possible damn value could an election have if people don't have free speech either? But the point is that we don't arrive at truth by opinion poll. We don't arrive at truth by consensus. And for the exact same reason, democracy does not confer moral legitimacy upon the government. The best part of my country's founding document, the Constitution of the United States, and its Bill of Rights, begins, Congress shall make no law establishing a religion, prohibiting the free exercise thereof, restricting freedom of speech. It is saying that that is outside the realm of any supermajority. Democracy, hands off. These are rights and freedoms that individuals possess, regardless of what the majority thinks, regardless of what the majority wants. Now, there's another point, though, here to make. When we do have this election, we will get, at least of the sample that the PLO is allowing to be, to vote here, we'll get a reflection of their opinion. But their opinion could be evil. Their opinion could be dead wrong. In fact, in the case of the PLO elections, let me suggest that it's going to be different flavors of evil, different degrees and, formulations of evil. That you're going to basically choose from. And if the culture is rotten, all you're going to have is a reflection of the culture, of the rotten culture. Doesn't make it morally legitimate, doesn't make it politically legitimate, and it doesn't. Anyone who puts a value on this is obviously, behind this. Okay, well, we need a two-state solution, and if we show that we're, democratic and we can run, elections, then we qualify morally as having this second state in the region for a legitimate two-state solution. No, it is not. It does not, and it would not, and it doesn't help. Let's say a majority of them say, yeah, well, we're still committed to the destruction of Israel and the killing of Jews wherever they exist. Would that make it okay? Okay. The PLO now legitimately stands for mass murder, genocide, and the destruction of Israel? No. It might give us some empirical evidence of just how rotten the political and moral ideas that govern Palestinians today are. That's about the effect of this election. Now, am I opposed to representative government? No, of course not. But within its context, within the Congress shall make no law, we need to have and even short of a perfect or ideal system, we need to have a peaceful means of change. But that requires both freedom of speech, freedom of political expression, and a nonviolent means of changing the system, an election. So does an election have value? Yes, there is a value to it. It allows us to not have to have a civil war every time we need fundamental change in something. But apart from that, it really will just reflect the values, however rotten or however noble those values are of the population that you're doing the election from, even assuming it's a legitimate election and fairly reflects the opinion of the people that are allowed to vote. I can only imagine, though, this is a form of giving. So after that long-winded peroration, let me just say, this is an attempt at legitimizing their rule of the West Bank. It's an attempt at legitimizing their concept of what a two-state solution would be. See, we can have elections. See, we're open to what the people think. And see, we've got the magic pixie dust of democracy that imbues us, even no matter how evil our ideas might be.
Yeah, so there's a few things we can cover. So first, you mentioned sort of who will be allowed to participate in election. So I think it was already stated that all candidates, and I don't know how much we know about exactly how the sort of election will work yet, but basically the candidates will have to commit to the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization's political platform, its international obligations, and UN resolution, meaning a group like Hamas would most likely not participate since they have disagreements. This was stated by the Palestinian news agency Wafa. Separately, also it was said that the PLO Executive Committee will be charged with establishing a preparatory committee to manage the logistical arrangements needed to facilitate the forthcoming elections. Of course, the Palestinian territories are very fractured, not to mention they have no control over Gaza. I think there is also some controversy when it comes to the so-called Palestinians in the East Jerusalem, who are permanent residents of Israel. I believe that was sort of a contention in the past, as well as what it would exactly mean when it comes to all of Palestinian diaspora. But I think a different thing I want to focus on before that is, yeah, you've said something about sort of like what does it even mean to really sort of understand governing, understand like elections, why we need elections or why elections are important, and understanding this whole process. It actually reminded me of an old Onion skit where basically they approved a bill in Congress, but they forgot thought how to actually make a bill into law. So they were going around saying, well, maybe if we just like shake each other's hand all over the place and like applause, maybe that will make it a law. Or maybe if we stamp it into the book where all the other laws are, maybe that will make it into law. And it reminded me of this basically idea that for countries, or not even countries, but for many Middle Eastern nations is if they only imitate the process that we do, okay, so people will go into ballot box and they throw in things and that will make us legitimate like they are, right? Like that's the important part of it. Or well, we'll have the president Mahmoud Abbas, who basically has dictatorial power and can do whatever we want, but we'll set up the separate building where different people will be, and that somehow will make us legitimate.
It's
And
not, it's moral nonsense.
yeah,
If your government is going to be moral, the concept that bridges morality and politics is the concept of individual rights. You don't understand rights as a concept, you are not going to, cannot have a legitimate form of government. Whether you vote in the Nazis, whether you vote in slavery, whether you vote in, and then you point out here, it's Fatah and different flavors within the acceptable Fatah range. And so, but you see, we're going to have an election. So that's going to give us this coat of paint that we call moral legitimacy. No. And on this score, please let me recommend to anyone who hasn't read them. I never tire of recommending these essays by Ayn Rand. Man's Rights, The Nature of Government, Collectivized Rights. Those are three very important essays by Ayn Rand. You can find them in Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. You can find the first two in The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand. It is the concept of individual rights. This, as I say, like the American Bill of Rights begins, Congress shall make no law. Point blank, these are just things outside the realm of government. These are basic rights and freedoms that people have as such, and no majority, no democracy can overcome them. I use the example, if there's 9 people in a room, or 10, excuse me, 10 people in a room, and 9 of them decide to beat up the 10th guy. They have a 90% supermajority. Does that confer the moral legitimacy on their beating up of the 10th guy? No, of course it doesn't. And that's in effect what a lot of people, though, substitute for what is morally legitimate. You see, if you believe that property rights aren't the contextual absolutes that property rights really are, then what you're going to say is we should have economic democracy. And so long as the majority vote to expropriate, and it doesn't matter, they could even vote to expropriate themselves through some tax law, it would not make it morally legitimate. It cannot make it morally legitimate simply because you wave the wand of democracy. But it gives that veneer, you see, that it's not really a principle at all. It's an intrinsic absolute taken out of context. All other things being equal, is the consent of the governed important? Is it important to have a peaceful means of changing the situation, your current form of governments, or some law that you might have? Yes, it is. It's a good thing. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be votes, elections, representative government. No, but they have to be circumscribed by morality. They have to be circumscribed by the moral principle of individual rights. And I am absolutely certain, as I sit here, that the Palestinian population, whether in diaspora or in the West Bank, do not have the first clue as to the objective concept of rights. And so whatever they vote for, or however large the election base, is basically going to be illegitimate, morally illegitimate. And so people have a hard time swallowing that. A lot of political pundits, well, it's democracy in action and democracy makes things legitimate. No, out of context, democracy is just a form of fascism.
yeah, absolutely. And the fact is that we will jump right on that, right? George Bush originally said it's Palestinians have to have election. He forced Israel to
And you
basically
have to
help
have Hamas on
facilitate
the ballot.
and yeah, and
Imagine,
have Hamas on the
imagine
ballot.
that. Imagine a Western leader saying, "Oh no, all that you need to do is have an election and include, the Nazis, the communists, the Hamas, and suddenly you've got a legitimate election." No, 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 you do not have a right, even by majority vote, to enslave people, to violate their rights, to take their property. No, you don't. Um, do I want a peaceful means of changing the situation? Yes, yes, but certain things are absolutely morally out of bounds. That is to say, violations of individual rights. A government is only legitimate morally insofar as it recognizes, and to the degree it recognizes, individual rights. Now, there is an important compared to what principle. And so, is Israel perfect? Is America perfect? No. But do they have some recognition of free speech? Do they have some recognition of individual rights? Yes. And so they are qualitatively superior to elections that you might have, say, in Nazi Germany or in the antebellum South where they were slaves. Or let me suggest the PLO's elections that they're planning on having among Palestinians. No, but as I say, it will take the temperature. I will get a medical diagnosis of just how rotten their political culture is, at least. I mean, I suppose I can't dismiss the value altogether of having these elections. Perhaps we'll be able to have some, presuming it's fair and presuming it is open to everybody, we'll be able to some degree to measure just how rotten the culture, Palestinian culture is.
Yeah, I mean, I can bring up a quote from one of the officials who said, "This step is the minimum possible reform under the current conditions of division and war. At the very least, it will bring a new generation of lawmakers and leaders into the PLO and the State of Palestine's institutions." And again, that's such a non-fundamental focus, as if the problem with the Palestinian or the whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict is that you don't have the right people at the Ministry of the like transportation or something. It's ridiculous. The fact is that all of Palestinian people want Paul also says they have institutions. I mean, yeah, even even claiming that they have institutions is already well. No, they need to pay out those Jew killing sort of money to people who do so. So yeah, they have something. But yeah, as it says, the Palestinian Authority has very little control over even the areas they are supposed to control. In areas like Jenin, they are pretty much absent. They have absolutely no authority there. So yeah, I have no idea how they are planning to do this type of election. But yeah, this idea that this is solving anything, I think, is ridiculous. This is simply either them trying to gain some international favor, them trying to, which Mahmoud Abbas has been trying to do in the last, I'm not sure where it sort of started, but very, well, not very recently, but recently he very much started to appeal to mainly the European Union for more support. But it's ridiculous. None of this is going to change. Nothing has fundamentally changed within the Palestinian population that suddenly, now they'll elect the Jeffersonian Democrats all in their elections. No, it's gonna be Fatah's probably gonna win, and then the second ones are gonna be the old DFLP, the PFLP, the whatever you want to, whichever, what do you call them, like anagram of different letters you want to pick. It's all just going to be a bunch of Islamists or communists. It's not going to be anything better. It's not going to be any sort of voice that is calling for peace with Israel, because this is not what Palestinians themselves want. We do not need elections. We've seen polls in the past. All of them are suggesting that what Palestinians want is more violence. They celebrate October 7th. They liked that October 7th happened. They were rewarded for October 7th happening. How many nations, especially in the European Union, have recognized the Palestinian state since October 7th? Because of October 7th, France is considering recognizing Palestinian state and is trying to push United Kingdom to do so as well. Again, remember, this all the recognitions that have happened in the last few years are because Hamas has decided to go in and kill Jews. That's how it happened. So why would you expect Palestinians to now say, okay, let's go back to not even peaceful times, but less actively violent sort of past? Um, no, Palestinians want violence, and when elections happen, they'll pick people who want violence.
No, it is grotesquely immoral to reward the Palestinians in the wake of October 7th but it's grotesquely immoral to recognize. It's been grotesquely immoral to recognize this two-state solution or the idea of the two-state solution. And of course, this is a bid for perceived legitimacy among international players. It's grotesquely immoral, though, for Western governments to go along with this, as if democracy could somehow confer legitimacy. But you see, even if it doesn't include all the Palestinians in places where they can't govern, as you point out, well, at least we'll have new faces. You know, oh boy, okay, so now we get, what is the value of the new faces over the old faces if it's all the same ideology of bigotry, you know, a mysticism-based bigotry? This is really an anti-principled approach to politics as such. We were talking in the seminar. If you're a subscriber to Ayn Rand Center UK, you can participate in our Sunday seminars where we discuss the work of Leonard Peikoff, and we're doing so for years now. And today we were talking about why should one act on principle. This principle, it doesn't deserve it. This basic rule, this intrinsic absolute out of context that they call the value of democracy, is just exactly that. At best, as I say, all you're doing is taking the temperature of how evil their approach to politics is. And the Western dupe leaders who might think that this confers legitimacy on the what is it, a 350 member panel that they're going to be electing. Okay, I don't care if every single Palestinian who voted was on, if it's millions or hundreds of thousands of people on this committee, it would not increase their legitimacy one iota. It is the illegitimate basis of their mysticism-based, collectivist, bigoted advocacy of violence against civilization that is always an inherently immoral, and I don't care what election they hold, if that's the reflected view, it is immoral as such. It's not even a moral principle at all. But talk about pragmatism when you say, well, all we have to do, if France and Great Britain simply recognize this two-state Palestinian solution and recognize a Palestinian government led by Fatah, because after all, they have these elections, what it is pure pragmatism. As if this time, if we try and appease evil, this time we'll get a better result. This time it won't result in more terrorism, another intifada, or something like that. Boy, see how that kind of thinking has gotten us to the perpetual war that we're in now. That kind of thinking has thrown a lifeline to terrorist groups again and again, or Iran. Look at how we're throwing a lifeline to Iran in just the same fashion by saying, well, if we just recognize them now and see how legitimate they are, they just had an election, it would not matter to me whether the election was open to everybody and everyone had a clean, vote, and they voted in some variant of let's destroy Israel, only we'll destroy Israel in a different way. It would not just morally justify their government or the political party that won the election.
The Palestinian official also said whether elections are held as the decree states or based on national consensus, there will be a new national council for the Palestinian people before the end of this year, and it will carry out its role in building a stable political system. So technically the decree was passed, but again, when it comes to sort of these type of governments, it's not like anything really means anything. So there were supposed to be elections in the past, and then they were postponed. Some were indefinitely postponed. So this might happen. We'll see. But again, nothing will fundamentally change. The only thing that will shift a little bit is people will try to excuse the actions of Palestinians even more because look, they have elections, and somehow that fixes everything. Somebody in the chat says that Abbas is 89, which is actually true. He's going to be 90 this year. So the big question is going to be how long is he going to stay around? And yeah, I mean, what will happen after? But again, it's not like Mahmoud Abbas is like the only evil person here. He
We'll have new faces. That's the important thing here, because after all, our faces do at some point run out. So we do need some new faces if we're going to last longer. But the point is, new faces are not in itself a good thing. Democracy. Let me just remind everyone: almost 20 years ago, the people of Gaza had an election, and by a plurality, they elected Hamas. and we got Hamas by a plurality election in Gaza. And what were the alternatives? Variations on the same theme. The other parties that were even competing were merely basically different degrees or different variants, different flavors of let's destroy Israel. That does not make Hamas's rule of Gaza legitimate, ladies and gentlemen. And even if it is, say, a more moderate face to it, a more moderate, superficial look, because it's Fatah and look, it's the Palestinian Authority. It does not change. The degree is not the difference. The new faces are not the difference. The number of people who voted for it aren't the difference. And it doesn't confer legitimacy at all. Now, in fact, until and unless they become more like Israel in terms of respecting individual rights, and in fact, one of the things that would be go with that hand in glove would be respecting Israel, acknowledging its right to exist, and acting on the principle that Israel has a right to exist. Until that happens, no government they elect is morally legitimate. And insofar as Western leaders, if this happens, if there is an election, if a lot of people vote in it, and Western leaders and Western media is going to just cry from the mountaintops how wonderful this is, see how amazing it is they have these elections, and isn't that a glorious thing? To that extent, they are totally dupes. They are totally dupes to what is going on right there now, and being sucked into this completely unprincipled approach to the political situation in the Middle East. Palestinian culture is the problem. In fact, Islamic culture more generally and more broadly. If the Palestinians are perhaps the worst flavor of Islamist ideology, nonetheless, it's Islamist ideology in the region that is the problem. It is anti-individual rights because what? It's anti-reason and based in mysticism and collectivism. And so long as that culture persists, no election will be able to fix the problem. And no election will be able to solve the long-term problem of Israel's security or the survival of Western civilization in the long run, actually. So, but watch. If the election happens and a lot of people vote in it, oh, Western leaders and Western media types, they will be the first to proclaim this from the mountaintops as the most glorious thing and therefore legitimate, and therefore these people deserve, you see, their own independent state. No, they do not.
Well, with that, let me remind people about the Irreplaceable Spark Conference. It's a conference Ayn Rand Center UK is organizing later this year, October 25th, 26th in Orange County, California. You can find out more about it using the link objectivism.co.uk, visiting the link. It's also in the chat, also pinned, and in the description. I'm sure it will be a lot of if you come, you'll find out a lot of interesting things, many things you haven't heard before, especially how people who are objectivists, who are interested in the ideas of Ayn Rand, how they actually use those ideas to achieve success in this life. So visit objectivism.co.uk. James will be there also, so you'll be able to meet him also if you like what he has to say and would like to hear about his success. James, any last thoughts from you, and where can people find you?
Yeah, you really can't miss that irreplaceable spark, irresparkable. No, irreplaceable spark conference. It really is unlike any other objectivist conference that has ever been conceived, and in it, it's going to be extremely valuable. And if there's any chance you can make it to Southern California in October, you can't miss it, my friends. I'm James Stevens Valiant. I'm at Facebook almost every day. Please hit me up with questions. Answering questions there almost every day. Please hit me up there.
Thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and bye-bye.
Be safe.